master has given Dobby a clock.
Hello, you beautiful f***ing nerds. This week we've got a pretty important question. As a trans person or a member of the LGBT community, is it okay to still enjoy Harry Potter? The answer is way more complicated than one would expect, but it generally boils down to yes, but. Before we explore whether or not Harry Potter is enjoyable as a LGBT community person, trans person, we first have to tear apart the work of art itself, and then tear apart the auteur, which, to be honest, has a very long fucking queue. Let us begin. Part 1. What is Harry Potter? Harry Potter, the book series, isn't the best thought-out series of mystery fantasy books, filled with multiple contradictions, confusing plot lines, simple enough world building, fantasy Nazis, positive views on slavery, evil for the sake of being evil, racism, minimal character motivation, queer erasure, and a ton of afterthoughts that have been made canon to appease fans, even though they were not mentioned or implied in any way, shape or form in the books. Most notably, Dumbledore being gay. Just a couple of issues there. I know that the internet has ripped Harry Potter and Joanne to bits. There are many better and more in-depth videos than this one. This video is more of a... Thank you, workers. It's past working hours. Can you fuck off? This video is a more personal exploration and a review of the situation coming from a queer ally, myself. Someone who Joanne hasn't directly attacked yet, as far as I know. Personal observation and experience. Now, I'm not exactly what you would call a Potterhead, which is a terrible term, but I do, and in some cases did, enjoy a fair bit of Harry Potter growing up. While I wasn't the target demographic at the start, as I wasn't even born when the first book came out, I still found myself resonating with the series at a young age. Nothing beyond having read some of the books as a child, and having re-watched the films a good few times over the years. Credit where credit is due, there is charm and magic, if you will, to a lot of the series, more so the films than the books. I am wearing a Slytherin shirt, but I'm like slightly too out of frame. Slytherin doesn't make any sense, by the way. Like, at all. Why is there an evil... It doesn't make any sense. Like, there's like an entire house in the school that's dedicated to just evil kids. That's so like... I genuinely find that like one of the most offensive things in the book. Yeah, it doesn't... Like, that's a seclusion... Like, it's not giving kids a fair chance in any way. They're just like the evil kids. There's a couple of characters who aren't evil, necessarily. Like Snape, who simps for Lily throughout the... I guess he was a double agent? I don't know. Snape's a good character, but I'm just saying that, like, Slytherin doesn't make any sense. What can I say? Like many of you, I'm a sucker for nerdy shit. I like fantasy, but when I learned that Rowling, Joanne, was insensitive, and by insensitive, I actually mean completely misunderstanding what transgender is, I had some trouble coming to terms with that. You see, many of my friends are trans, or at least LGBT, and to see them excluded and attacked for simply being who they are gave me some difficulty, well, reading the books especially. It's an entirely different story how Rowling just kept adding useless and simply weird information via Twitter to the Harry Potter books. And if anything, it is proof that some people should just not be allowed to have Twitter. Myself included. I should also mention that I have a much easier time separating the movies from Rowling than I do the books. Of course, because she had much less involvement overall, well, I'm still being involved, on the films in comparison to the books. And the movies involving so many good-intentioned and good-natured people, notably both Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson, are very much queer and trans allies. Emma Watson was even blocked by Rowling. The movies also entirely cut some of the more troublesome topics that were present in the books, such as the spew debate. But even as a fantasy writer, Rowling does not do the best job at establishing diverse characters. A black man named Kingsley Shacklebolt and an Asian girl named Cho Chang are troublesome. Don't get me wrong, I do not want diversity for the sake of diversity like Disney does these days. As an example of this forced diversity, here is a quote from Peter Dinklage. Literally no offense to anyone, but I was a little taken aback when they were very proud to cast a Latina actress as Snow White. But you're still telling the story of Snow White in the Seven Dwarfs. Take a step back and look at what you're doing there. It makes no sense to me. You're progressive in a one way, but then you're still making that fucking backward story about 7 dwarves living in a cave together. Have I done nothing to advance the cause from my soapbox? I guess I'm not loud enough. Poor Peter Dinklage. I don't think I'm in the minority here, thinking that making Dumbledore a gay character was definitely an afterthought, rather than something that was meant to be established and incorporated since the first book. Even if it wasn't meant to be incorporated in the first book, at least, you know, in any of the books it could have been hinted at. There were 0 hints or implications that any of the characters in the book are gay, let alone queer. Rowling announced the character's sexuality months after the final book in the series was released. And while at the time this may have seemed progressive, in retrospect this was way more like a publicity act rather than an actual representation. You see, I've had a difficult time reading the books without thinking about Rowling's views. Views that I fundamentally disagree with. It's not even the fact that she disagrees or doesn't understand what transgender is, it's that she's outright transphobic. I'm very passionate about this. Right, but is it okay to enjoy her works from an objectively creative point of view? I don't know if you can so easily look at the novels from such an objective view. You see, in my experience, every time I sit down and try to read one of her books, I'm reading her words. I keep in my mind that I'm reading the words of a person I fundamentally disagree with. I just had a really cool idea, I should be reading one of the books and then throw it away into the river. Not eco-friendly. On a similar note, I watch The Shining probably at least once a year, but every time I sit down to watch it, I know I am watching the works of an absolute cunt. Do I enjoy The Shining? Yes. Can I watch it without thinking about the pain that the crew had to go through while filming? No. I appreciate the hard work that the cast and crew put into the project. I appreciate the fact that they stuck through it even under the horrible conditions that they were forced to work under. And this is also why I can appreciate the Harry Potter films and have a much easier time watching them than I do reading it. I'm aware that writing a book is not a sole task. Yes, I'm aware that writing and publishing a book goes through a lot of different people before it's in my hands that I'm about to burn. Not my hands, the book. At the time of this recording, I've read the first 3 books. Philosopher's Stone when I was only 9, started on Chamber of Secrets right after, and I didn't finish it until last year. Prisoner of Azkaban is probably the best one I've actually read so far in terms of story, objectively. And while I enjoyed the story as much as I try to force myself to, I have a much easier time reading the works of a drug addict. But I can still enjoy and appreciate the Harry Potter films. I like fantasy and I like filmmaking. Gee, can you tell? Part 2. A brief analysis of Rowling's work. Slavery. As I have briefly mentioned beforehand, adding diversity and politics into your world for the sheer sake of adding it never bodes well for the audience that you're trying to represent. Making one of the characters gay as an afterthought was met with obvious mixed reception. Exploring slavery in your fantasy novel could have been a very interesting part of your story. Social commentary and political outline of our own modern world usually tends to add a layer of subtext and value to works of fiction, even if it doesn't sit with everyone. However, handling it the way Joanne did does raise some very difficult situations in context with the books. There are people on YouTube that have explained it way better than I could. Nonetheless, I'm sure that we all know that house elves are slaves to the wizarding world. The wizarding world that Warner Bros. So proudly advertises. And it isn't just house elves that are considered below witches and wizards. Every other race other than witches and wizards are considered second-hand and third-class citizens of the world. This would have been fine if the characters ever did anything about this in the story of the books to tackle the racial and social injustices of the world that they live in. But they never do. You see my problem. Harry Potter, after Sirius Black dies, is a slave owner. What does Joanne do to make her readers more comfortable with this fact? House elves like being slaves, but Dobby didn't. Dobby was just a weirdo, apparently, that was in a minority of elves whom do actually dislike slavery. Yet the protagonists of Harry Potter never see anything wrong with the fact that house elves are in fact enslaved and magically bound to be slaves. Here's a question for you, Joanne. If elves like being slaves, why do they need to be magically bound to be slaves in the first place? Why don't they just show up randomly in wizard houses and start doing random chores around the house? Because it makes them happy. That would have been a much better explanation, and you could have still kept Dobby. You could have still had Dobby be a slave in the second book by explaining that Dobby was enslaved by the Malfoy family when he wanted to leave. The fear of the queer. Joanne explores some interesting topics in her damn books. The character of Nymphadora, especially in the books, may resonate with a queer audience as she sticks out like a sore thumb. However, by the end of the series, she's acting normal and mature, which could imply that Rowling thinks and believes you can outgrow being queer. If you look at her Twitter, this is actually true. Despite a large selection of the Harry Potter fanbase being queer, Joanne openly excludes them. But despite that, a lot of these same fans continue to be fans. Some may not buy the merch, some may not ever watch the films or read the books again. That is their right to do so. The important thing, however, is not to let a bigoted woman like Joanne take away what you resonate with. The moment she published her first book, it became a free-for-all for who wants to relate and resonate with these characters and make it their own. Some members of the community, myself included, wish to spite her works despite her beliefs. Joanne can't take away the films or the merch from us. It is engraved in our own character, and it is our right to enjoy these works of fiction as we see fit. We are also more than entitled to burn the books or read them every week if we wish so. So to answer your question, which you didn't ask, is it okay to enjoy the works of Harry Potter as a queer person? The answer is simply up to you. You shouldn't let it be taken away from you if it's what you enjoy. At the same time, if you wish to resent it for obvious reasons, then more power to you, my friend. This is quite a bit of a shorter video than usual, isn't it? I don't think this is going to be 20 minutes long. But that's fine. Not every video needs to be 20 minutes long. This isn't really a video essay. This is expressing my own views and how I think the whole situation should be looked at. If you like Harry Potter and you're still queer, that's fine. You shouldn't let other queer people be like, you shouldn't like Harry Potter. If you like it, that is your right to do so. So, to kind of encapsulate everything I've said, if you're queer and you want to burn every single Harry Potter book that you could find because of Joanne, you go do that. I advocate arson. If you want to buy every single Lego Harry Potter set on the shelves because you love them so much, that is also your right to do that. Despite it semi-fueling Rowling in a way, but you go and do that, and you go and spite her and tell her, you can't take this shit away from me. That got very deep there, very quickly. Anyway, if you like this video, please subscribe. I make videos weekly now. Like the video if you like the video. Obviously, if you didn't like the video, get the fuck. If you're still here at the end, I applaud you. You're in the minority. A round of applause to you for making it all the way to the end if you did. And please come back next week where we continue with the Chucky series, which is probably going to be a two-parter. Yeah, season 1 and season 2. We'll see. But that will be a good video. I don't have a cigarette. But this was inevitable eventually, wasn't it? That we would explore Harry Potter at one point. F*** you for being predictable.